Hello everybody, welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 26th of May 2019 of the New Delhi edition. Now if you have a look at today's newspaper, most of the articles in the today's newspaper are mainly political in nature. This is on account of the recently announced election results. Now with respect to important articles from the perspective of UPSC, we were able to narrow down to only these three articles. The first important article is related to the development of new type of superconductors by a group of researchers at the Indian Institute of Science. The second important article is related to the launch of the nuclear powered Arctic icebreaker by Russia. The third important article is related to the Minaret of Jam located in Afghanistan. Now the first article appears on page number 20. The title of the article is Indian Institute of Science Researchers confirm the superconductivity breakthrough. This article shall be important from the perspective of prelims under the subsection General Science and Technology. Further, this article shall also be important from the perspective of mains GS paper 3 under the subsection Technology, specifically under indigenization of technology and development of new technology. Now this particular article here highlights that a group of researchers from the Indian Institute of Science have developed a new type of superconductor. Now this superconductor has the ability to display zero resistance to current or a zero resistance to the flow of electricity even at the room temperature. Now this is considered to be a major scientific breakthrough in case of India because the superconductors normally operate at below 0 degrees Celsius. So because of the narrow range of temperature in which the superconductors work, it drastically reduces the practical applications in which they can be used. So as the researchers from the IISc claim, the new superconductor can display this particular property even at the room temperature, because of which the range of applications in which the new superconductor can be used can be widened. Hence, as part of this video analysis, the various topics which we would be discussing here include what exactly are the superconductors, how the superconductors develop the zero resistance to electricity, certain important properties of superconductors, and certain details related to the new scientific breakthrough. Let us start analyzing these aspects of the article one by one. Let us first understand as to what exactly are the superconductors. Now, superconductors are essentially the materials that display zero resistance to the flow of current at extremely lower temperature, such as at 10 degree Kelvin. It is to be noted that the 10 degree Kelvin in terms of Celsius is around minus 263 degrees. So at extremely lower temperature, the superconductors display zero resistance to the flow of current. So because of this peculiar property, the superconductors have an ability to transport electrons without any resistance. So since the electrons are transported without any resistance, it does not lead to either the production of heat or that of sound. The superconductors were first discovered by a scientist by the name Onus in the year 1914. Now this particular scientist observed the property of superconductivity in mercury when mercury was cooled down to around 4.2 degree Kelvin. And some of the materials that display superconductivity include materials such as tin, aluminium, mercury, some of the metallic alloys, as well as certain heavily doped semiconductors. However, it is to be noted that the superconductivity is not observed in some of the noble metals such as gold and silver. Now coming to the properties of superconductors, you can understand the property of superconductor by looking at this particular graph, wherein along the x-axis the temperature is plotted in terms of Kelvin and along the y-axis the resistance is plotted in terms of ohms. Now you can look at the nature of relationship between temperature and resistance, wherein as the temperature reduces, the resistance of a material also reduces. Now in terms of non-superconducting materials, as the temperature reduces, the resistance of the material also reduces. However, the resistance does not reduce to zero. This is because the non-superconductors have certain impurities which lead to development of resistance even when the temperature is reduced to an extremely lower value. On the other hand, if you look at the graph with respect to superconductors, As the temperature reduces, the resistance also reduces. However, at a particular temperature, the resistance of the material completely reduces to zero, and the temperature at which the material develops the superconducting ability, that temperature is referred to as the critical temperature. So as we have seen here, different materials display superconducting ability. It is to be noted that the critical temperature varies for different materials. Now for example, with respect to mercury, the critical temperature was 4.2 Kelvin. Now with respect to the critical temperature for tin or aluminium, the critical temperature may be different from that of mercury. So the first property of superconductors is that they develop zero electrical resistance at extremely lower temperature. Secondly, all the superconducting materials have a critical temperature, that is the temperature at which the material start displaying the superconducting ability. And as stated before, the critical temperature for different material varies. And the next property of the superconducting material is the property which is known as the Minaret effect. Now this particular effect has been associated with a scientist known as Minaret, and this effect refers to the fact that the superconducting materials expel the weak magnetic field. Now this can be understood by looking at this particular diagram. So as we can see here, when the temperature is greater than the critical temperature, the magnetic field is able to penetrate the superconducting material. However, when the temperature is reduced to below the critical temperature, the superconducting material here is able to expel the weak magnetic field. And this particular effect is referred to as the Minaret effect. And the last property of the superconductor is that the superconducting materials do not face any kind of power loss. This can be explained by looking at this particular formula where the power is denoted as I square R, where I stands for current and R stands for resistance. So in case of superconductors, the R here, that is the resistance, becomes equal to 0, because of which the power loss here would also be equal to 0. So having understood the concept of superconductors and their properties, let us now understand as to why some of the materials display the superconducting ability. So before understanding as to how certain materials develop the superconducting ability, let us first understand the development of electrical resistance in the normal materials, that is the non-superconducting materials. It is to be noted that the electrical resistance of a material essentially depends upon the ability of an electron to pass through that material easily. So if the electron is able to pass through the material easily, then the material would have got lesser resistance. On the other hand, if the electron encounters any obstacle, then the resistance of the material would be higher. And this particular electrical resistance of a material depends upon a number of factors such as the kind of material, the length of a material, and its temperature. Now for example, the electrons are able to flow easily through the conductors, because of which the electrical resistance of the conductors is extremely lower. On the other hand, if one looks at the insulators, the electrons are not able to pass through the insulating objects, and because of which their resistance is higher. On similar lines, the electrical resistance also depends upon the length of a material. That is, the higher the length of a material, higher would be its resistance. Apart from that, as we have discussed before, as the temperature of an object reduces, the electrical resistance also reduces. Now, apart from these three factors that determine the electrical resistance of a material, the electrical resistance of a material is also determined by the crystalline lattice of a material. Now, the crystalline lattice here essentially refers to the arrangement of atoms in a material. So, the question here is how the crystalline lattice of a material leads to development of the electrical resistance. Now, this can be understood by looking at this particular diagram. So when a voltage is applied across a material, it leads to the vibration of atoms in the crystalline lattice. So because of this vibration of atoms, the electron which is passing through this particular material keeps on colliding with this vibrating atoms. And because of the frequent collision between the electron and the vibrating atoms, the electron loses its energy. Apart from that, the electron also transfers some of its energy to the vibrating atoms. So as the more amount of energy is transferred from the electron to the vibrating atoms, the vibration of the atoms increases, and this in turn leads to an obstacle to the free flow of electrons. And such an obstacle to the free flow of electrons leads to the development of electrical resistance in the normal materials. So what exactly happens in the superconductors? Now the superconducting ability of the superconductors has been explained by a theory known as the BCS theory. Now this particular theory has been put forward by three scientists, namely Bardeen, Cooper and Schrieffer. First and foremost, it is to be noted that when the temperature of the superconductors is reduced below the critical temperature, the vibration of the atoms in the crystalline lattice drastically reduces. So because of the lower vibration of the atoms, the electron here would be able to pass through the material easily. Apart from this particular reason, another reason for the development of zero electrical resistance in the superconductors has been attributed to the formation of the Cooper electron pairs in the superconductors. So let us understand as to how this Cooper pair is actually formed. Now you all must be aware that the electrons are negatively charged. On the other hand, the atoms which have given up electron are positively charged. So as the unlike charges attract each other, there is mutual attraction between the electron and the atom. So when an electron passes through the crystalline lattice of a superconducting material, there is a slight ripple in its path. Now this particular slight ripple in its path can be observed in this particular diagram, where the positively charged atoms have got attracted towards the negatively charged electron. So if you look at this particular area of the material, a large number of positively charged atoms have got accumulated, and this leads to a development of positive charge within a material. Naturally, two electrons repel each other due to the negative charges. But in this particular case, as there is a development of a positive charge within a material, the electron here gets attracted towards this positive charge. So the second electron, which is going in the opposite direction, starts going in the same direction as another electron. So one can see here, there is a development of a weak bond between the two electrons, and these two electrons essentially form a Cooper pair. So in case of superconductors, what essentially is happening is that two electrons are forming the Cooper pair, and they are able to pass through the object easily without any kind of resistance. And this is precisely the reason as to why the superconductors display zero electrical resistance. Now with respect to new scientific breakthrough in the field of superconductors, the researchers at the Indian Institute of Science have developed a new superconductor which displays the superconducting ability even at the room temperature. Now this is considered to be scientific breakthrough because normally the superconductors display the superconducting ability only at extremely lower temperature. However, the researchers have able to develop a new type of superconductor which is able to display this particular ability even at the room temperature. Now this particular superconductor is in the form of the nano-sized films wherein the silver nanoparticles have been embedded into the gold matrix. And according to the researchers at the Indian Institute of Science, these nano-sized films have been able to show an appreciable drop in the electrical resistance even at the room temperature. Now with respect to how this scientific breakthrough was achieved, this is highly technical as well as scientific, and hence it is unlikely that the UPSC would ask a question with respect to the technology involved in the development of new superconductors. So these are some of the important aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now the next article appears on page number 20. The title of the article is Russia launches the Arctic icebreaker. This article shall be important mainly from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Current Events of International Importance. Apart from that, this article is also important from the perspective of UPSC mains. This is because a related question has already been asked in GS paper 1 in the UPSC mains 2018, wherein the question was, why is India taking keen interest in the Arctic region? Now this particular article here has highlighted that Russia has launched a new nuclear powered icebreaker ship known as Ural. Now icebreaker ships are essentially the special type of ships that have been designed in order to break ice and make way for the other ships in the extremely cold climatic regions such as the Arctic Ocean. Now, Russia has planned to deploy the new nuclear powered icebreaker ship Ural for the development of the northern sea route in the Arctic Ocean. Now, presently, there are two shipping routes which connect Europe with the East Asian countries such as China and Japan, wherein the first route is the southern sea route. Now, the southern sea route, which has been denoted by the blue color here, connects the European countries with countries such as China and Japan through the Suez Canal as well as the Indian Ocean. On the other hand, the northern sea route lies along the northern coast of Russia, and this particular sea route basically connects the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific Ocean. Now, some of the seas which are included in the northern sea route include Barents Sea, Kara Sea, Laptev Sea, and the East Siberian Sea. Now, one of the main advantage of the development of northern sea route is that the northern sea route is 40% shorter as compared to the southern sea route, and this leads to a decrease in the transportation time. It reduces the fuel consumption by the ships, it reduces the environmental emission. Apart from that, the northern sea route faces a lower risk of maritime piracy. Now, this is because if one looks at the southern sea route, the area in the Indian Ocean region, particularly along the Somalian coast, is prone to the maritime piracy. Further, if one looks at the UPSC mains question asked in mains 2018, the question was, why is India taking keen interest in the Arctic region? Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us understand the opportunities and challenges with respect to the Arctic region from the perspective of India. Let us first understand the opportunities for India in the Arctic region. Now, you all must be aware the Arctic region has been facing a rapid depletion of its ice cover mainly due to global warming. And this rapid depletion of ice cover has opened up new avenues of opportunities. This is because the Arctic region is considered to be quite rich in natural resources, which is evident in the fact that the Arctic region accounts for 13% of the global oil reserves as well as 30% of the natural gas reserves. So, since India is a major importer of oil as well as natural gas, the Arctic region can help India to meet its energy security. Secondly, the Arctic region can also help India in research and development. This is because by involving in the Arctic region, India can understand the dynamics of melting of glaciers in the Arctic region, and this particular knowledge can then be applied in order to understand the impact of melting of glaciers in the Himalayan region. And thirdly, as we have discussed before, the melting of glaciers in the Arctic region would lead to the development of the northern sea route, which is considered to be considerably shorter as compared to the southern sea route. It is because of this particular reason India can take advantage of the reduced sailing distance between Europe and Asia. Nextly, by using the northern sea route through the Arctic region, India would be able to avoid the maritime piracy which is associated with the southern sea route. And lastly, some of the climatologists have argued that the higher melting of glaciers in the Arctic region would have an impact on the Indian Ocean. It is in this particular regard, by involving in the Arctic region, India would be able to understand the exact nature of relationship between the melting of glaciers in the Arctic region and its impact on the Indian monsoon. Now, coming to India's engagement with the Arctic region. Now, the India's engagement with the Arctic region started with the launch of the Arctic Research Program in the year 2007. Through the Arctic Research Program, India sought to understand the impact of the melting of glaciers in the Arctic region on the Indian monsoons. The Arctic Research Program was then followed by the launch of first scientific expedition to the Arctic region in the same year, that is 2007. Subsequently, India has developed a research base known as Himadri at Svalbard in Norway. Apart from that, the countries which are lying along the Arctic Ocean, these countries have formed an Arctic Council in the year 1996. It is to be noted that India has been granted the observer status in the Arctic Council in the year 2013. Now, with respect to challenges for the developing countries like India, with respect to the melting of glaciers in the Arctic region, first and foremost, the greater economic activity such as the opening of the shipping routes as well as the increase in the exploitation of oil and natural gas would accelerate the global warming, and this would have an adverse impact on the developing countries such as India. Secondly, as discussed before, the increase in the melting of glaciers in the Arctic region would have an adverse impact on the Indian monsoon, and this would in turn have an adverse impact on the Indian agriculture. This is because the Indian agriculture is predominantly dependent upon the monsoons, wherein almost 55% of the agricultural land is presently rain fed. Thirdly, the increase in the melting of glaciers would lead to the increase in the sea level, and this would have an adverse impact on the low-lying coastal areas. And lastly, it is being said that the greater amount of economic activity in the Arctic region would mainly benefit the Western countries, and this would in turn accentuate or increase the divide between the North and Southern countries. So these are some of the important aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. With this, let us now take up the next article. Now the next article appears on page number 14. The title of the article is Afghan floods put the famous minaret at the risk of collapse. This article shall be important mainly from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Current Events of International Importance. Now this particular article here highlights that the recent floods in Afghanistan has put the Minaret of Jam, which is considered to be Afghanistan's most revered cultural treasure, at the risk of collapse. Hence, in this regard, let us understand certain basic details related to the Minaret of Jam. Now, as shown in this particular diagram here, the Minaret of Jam is a 65-meter Islamic religious tower. It was built during the 12th century by Ghiyasuddin, who was the ruler of the Ghurid Empire in Afghanistan. Now, with respect to location of this particular minaret is located in the Sharak district in the Ghor province, as shown in this particular diagram. Further, you need to note that the Minaret of Jam has been placed under the UNESCO list of the World Heritage Properties in danger. Now, with respect to main threat posed to the Minaret of Jam, this particular minaret is situated at the confluence of two rivers, namely Harirud and Jamrud. So, since it is situated at the confluence of two rivers, because of the constant erosion of the river banks, the stability of the Minaret of Jam has been threatened. Apart from that, the area around the minaret has come under the illegal excavations, leading to an increased threat to the stability of the Minaret of Jam. Now, these are some of the important aspects which one must know with respect to Minaret of Jam. Now, based upon our discussion, these 4 questions shall be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answers to these 4 questions. We shall be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. Now the first question here is, which among the following phenomena is associated with the superconductors? The first one here is Cooper pair, the second one here is the Minaret effect, and the third one is singularity. Now as we have discussed, both Cooper pair as well as Minaret effect is associated with the superconductors. However, with respect to singularity, it is associated with the concept of black holes. Hence, the correct answer to this particular question is B, that is 192 only. Now coming to the second question, the question here is, consider the following statements related to the Arctic Council. The first statement here is, it was formed through the Ottawa Declaration in 1996. Now this statement here is correct. The second statement reads as, only those countries that are located in the Arctic region are eligible for the full membership of the Arctic Council. Now even this particular statement here is correct. This is because if you look at the present membership of the Arctic Council, it is confined to only those countries which are located along the Arctic region. The third statement here reads as, India has been granted the observer status in the Arctic Council. As we have discussed, even this particular statement here is correct. So looking at the options, the correct answer to this particular question is D. Now coming to the third question, the question here is, consider the following statements related to the Minaret of Jam. The first statement here is, it is located along the border of Iran and Iraq. Now this statement here is wrong. This is because the Minaret of Jam is located in Afghanistan. The second statement reads as it has been placed under the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites in danger, which is correct as we have discussed. So the answer to this particular question is B. Now coming to the last question, the question here is consider the following statements related to the superconductors. The first statement here is these materials display zero electrical resistance at extremely higher temperature. Now this is wrong because the superconductors display the zero electrical resistance at extremely lower temperature. The second statement reads as these materials are able to expel the weak magnetic field. This statement here is correct, and this particular phenomena is also referred to as the Meissner effect. The third statement reads as different superconductors have different critical temperature. Even this statement here is correct. Accordingly, the correct answer to this particular question is B, that is 2 and 3 only. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question for the day.